Welcome to Get Serious. Have another episode covering strategies on subdivides. I could probably podcast about this topic every single day, or at least most days of the week, frankly, from just the variety that we see and potential issues. I know I did a pod earlier this week about how to avoid adverse selection, and again checking out the various active parcels that might be in the area and how much you need to undercut in order to price appropriately. So we had another property we were assessing in a very rural area of Tennessee. Actually, it's in the same county as probably the most problematic remaining parcel in our portfolio, this small infill lot that is just taken literally forever to find any movement on. We've already cut price by 50% and still barely have any activity. This was a key lesson about price per acre not being applicable when you are looking at parcels below 2 acres, and has really turned us off from infill lots. Because if you get them wrong even slightly, there's almost no recourse on them. But that is something we've touched on a number of times. Either way, this was like a kind of immediate revulsion toward looking at this county just because we've struggled in it for so long. And this particular investor had a 93-acre parcel that really wanted to do an aggressive minor subdivide, with the majority of the child parcels being 2 acres, I think like 10 plus of them, and then a few 5 acres and a couple 10 acres as well for some variety. But again, given that we have not sold this infill lot that is, well positioned, Lakeview, it's just a really rural area of Tennessee, just like not that much market activity. We're like, yeah, this is going to have to be an incredible deal for us to even consider working in this county again, after we've gotten burned so badly here. Critically about this one, so I'm going to run down some of the features and the issues. So it's an on-market property. Again, 93 acres, pretty well marketed too. Really nice photos. It has a 20-acre lake on the property. And so it was marketed at almost $1 million. It's been listed for almost 2 months. And again, I'm always skeptical. Okay, parent parcel, fine. If you're considering doing a subdivide on it, there's a real chance that you could force some appreciation, especially if you want to do some more significant value add work, that you could look at doing a minor subdivide from something that is active on market. But one of the proposed solutions was just trying to do a perk test and then clean up the property a bit. Yeah, you could get rid of maybe the algae on the lake. I think there was like an old decrepit house on it. I'm not sure how much that might have cost to clean up the property. It didn't look too bad. Like, the marketing photos seemed pretty solid. Most of the property is clear. And the land investor was proposing that, with a perk test and cleaning up the property a bit, that they'd be able to relist and sell for around 1.1 million, which to me just seemed pretty crazy. Like, building in an additional 150K of value from, to me, something that wasn't going to be too crazy. Like, it would be one thing if like the property was just really poorly marketed, just had, I don't know, like a survey as the marketing image, but it had really nice drone photos. Like, the property just looked already pretty nice. I don't think you're going to be able to do like too crazy of a cleanup, but again, I haven't been there. I might be missing some things here. This was an initial review, but still 150K to be adding on to an already very expensive property that was not moving within 2 months of being listed, and the seller's already willing to take a discount offer. And I'm not sure exactly what they were open to seller finance, which can be intriguing. It can buy you more room to work with and more time. But the problem is, if your pricing is still inappropriate, even for a longer timeline to sell child parcels, you're only going to screw yourself over. Even worse, if you're paying additional interest and so forth, depending on the terms of the deal with the seller. And then if you still haven't sold anything with what you were projecting, you're in for a world of hurt when you're having to pay month after month, or maybe a balloon payment at the end. Seller finance can be attractive to work for these high priced properties, but the underlying mechanics of the deal still need to make sense. And again, the fact that they're willing to take a potentially lower offer and do a terms deal is just telling me, okay, they're not immediately getting a lot of action. And I'm not surprised, given how rural that area is, and there was only like 2 other larger comps that have moved within the last year, like just not that active of a market, as I had mentioned. With that in mind, and actually there was another like 30-acre piece that the seller was also actively listing and the land investor wanted to consider, but probably 12 of those acres were full wetlands. You'd have to discount that. And so land investor had suggested, okay, we could probably exit with the Subdivide plan for like around $1.9 million over 12 to 18 months. And he gave a whole list of sold comps. So, it was trickier for me to review because there was no APNs, no addresses, anything like that. It was just, days on market and acreage, price per acre. I mean, better than nothing, but, I usually need more. Like, I'd rather, again, check out the actual characteristics. How superior are some of these parcels? When precisely were they sold as well? Besides the days on market, was it sold a year ago compared to within this post-trade war macro economy? That's what I want to know. And there was also no real differentiation between the price per acre for 1 acre parcels all the way up to, I don't know, like 15 acres, something like that. And so it was a blended acreage. I know that was the game plan for the child parcels they were planning to do, but that is going to be trickier to assess because, like I mentioned earlier, and a mistake that we have made is you can't really consider price per acre below 2 acres. You pretty much have to throw that out. You can get just a blended exit price for 2 acres or less and use that, but you really can't, again, consider the price per acre. It just doesn't work for properties of that size, 2 acres or less. So that can disturb the overall average of price per acre too when you're considering those properties. Even without taking into account that adjustment that I would have made, is the total blended price per acre, again, with the data that was provided to us, was like roughly 20,000 per acre. That could have worked if you were considering, actually I'm going to do the math right here as I'm doing this live because now I'm just forgetting. So 93.5. Yeah, so the thing is that projected $1.9 million exit for the 93 acres, that pretty much works right at that $20,000 per acre price point. However, you can't consider, ponds or lakes. Ponds, yes, you can, because usually they're not going to be too large. But if a lake, and this is pretty unusual property, right? Like the lake is 20 acres of the 93 acres. Like that's not usable land. You can't. You might get a bit of premium for the child parcels that are aligned against it, and I didn't see whatever the plan was for the subdivide process, but using a huge chunk of the acreage for your consideration of price per acre when it's just a lake, and not a particularly beautiful one at that either, it is not appropriate for assessing price per acre. So you have to remove that from your consideration for the actual usable land. So I just had to subtract that roughly 20 acres, and all of a sudden I'm looking at just over 70 acres of usable land within the property, which all of a sudden bumps my price per acre that I need to hit closer to like 26K per acre when I'm discounting what people aren't going to be able to live on. So when we keep that in mind, all of a sudden all those comps that were produced, that doesn't make sense for that exit, projected 1.9 million that they're anticipating to exit over 12 to 18 months when you take into account that lake situation. And then when I did my own market review, I was seeing, again, very limited market activity in the area. It was probably closer to like 15 to 17K exits, and a lot of those were sitting for like 8 months to 12 months. And again, no surprise, I've been struggling in this county for over 6 months of holding a certain parcel there as well. And the only area that we were seeing significant activity, again, if you're going to do a larger minor subdivide project, like you've got to see a lot more activity, and ideally some other minor subdivides that have succeeded in the past. And the only ones that were working in like that 2 to 5 acre range had a lake view, and they were right up against a golf course, like a more premium area. But pretty much everywhere else was not nearly as active and moving. And even those ones in that premium area, there were a couple getting close, right at that 25, 26K price per acre. level, but several were below that, and a lot of those were still sitting for like 6-8 months plus to close. So like just not that attractive of a subdivide to go after, again, in an area that's already struggling. Plus, again, the macro considerations, and something that I'm routinely bringing up and is part of our assessment, is these COVID boom markets, especially if you're doing infill lots or bringing a lot more residential opportunity to some of these COVID boom markets. Like, we just know inventory has been skyrocketing, prices are falling, builders, especially the smaller, even the large builders out there, just struggling to move anything. So you're just not going to have the demand quite as much, and bringing like a whole, I'd be very, very skeptical about bringing some of these larger projects that are pretty much only going to be usable for, infill resi building in an area that, areas of the country that are in the midst of a housing downturn, and, some upwards of 5-7% year over year, like pretty big downturns. So if it's outside of the Northeast or the Midwest, I'd be pretty cautious about that. So that's another consideration to keep in mind. Plus, trade war, macro in the background as well. So it's just another consideration to keep in mind here. Again, very, very tricky market. If you're going to be working on these much larger deals, you got to be extra certain, or just have an exceptional deal to justify the risk going after it. This one just didn't make sense to me when I looked at it from multiple different angles here. So again, hopefully this is helpful for you when you're considering these types of projects. I would like to do a lot more of these. They have to be the right opportunity. That's why I pay a lot of attention to them. We get smarter about them every day. Hopefully this helps you as well. SeriousLand.capital for any of your funding needs around the US. Land Daily Diligence Facebook group doing a live review later today, Mondays and Thursdays, 0 cost. And landpricer.ai, a lot more progress was just done from my engineering team. We nearly have the comp scraping portion done. That's just passing all its tests and ready to go live. It's the most sophisticated comp analysis in an automated sense that I've ever seen. Again, we have to have the most reliable tool for use in our own business. Nothing else is acceptable. So just know that is how we are building it. Can't wait to get that out to both myself and you all as well. Looking forward to next time. Subscribe and share. If you wouldn't mind leaving a 5-star review if you think I deserve it. That would help this podcast reach some more folks who might get some value out of it. Take care now.